minutes.
Yeah, some of the best have gotten caught on hot mic.
Yeah. My son plays hockey, so I always love watching like videos of the players. That is hilarious.
This is what I scribbled yesterday with 2 hours of sleep.
That's what I did.
That I could print before I left, and I've already.
Tried memorizing
I went
it.
through it a little bit this morning.
Since you have to leave the children.
My sister, luckily she's. I woke up, she had the chill this morning.
No,
there's no way.
we were just told to walk out between.
So she offered to
I
watch
think
them.
her desire is to actually
A little bit. She said she's psyched tomorrow, so she gets to sit.
I don't know.
And I even posted on our Facebook. You're a rock star. And that is myself, though. So I'm like, I think I can do that. I've never done it. So we'll see how it goes.
As long as it doesn't pop up as porn or something.
Well, I don't think so. I hope not. I texted to the people who was in 8 minutes. They probably don't even remember I'm doing it. Back to me now. It is. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you need to do.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Glad we all could be here today. I want to thank Representatives Titus, Horsford, and Lee for joining us and for hosting me in this wonderful statement about this facility. I'm particularly happy to have this conversation in such an important venue. The National Atomic Testing Museum shares the story of this country's nuclear weapons testing program at Nevada testing locations. Now, the folks in this room are all too familiar with this nuclear work and its lasting effects. I've held quite a few roundtables addressing the presumptives not covered by the pathway. These communities are experiencing pain, illness, loss, heartache, anger, confusion, and flat-out desperation for some relief. It is for these veterans, their families, and their communities that I'm here today. For those in this room, and those they represent, who continue to fight for the care they've earned in the face of repeated challenges. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say it is our duty to take care of our veterans. All too often we hear about deficit spending. What is a worthy way to spend our tax dollars? Well, it isn't on the men and women who serve this nation. Frankly, I don't know what is a worthy cause. We often say a budget is indicative of our values. Sadly, it seems that the sacred value of caring for our veterans is often at odds with making more veterans by sending them off to war, to new wars. But whether at home or abroad, training or on a mission, all our service members deserve their benefits once they transition out of the military. Frankly, I would like to see automatic enrollment into the VA system prior to transition back to duty, like mine will, the EBEST Act seeks to do. But I would like to see every veteran who served be able to get proper health care and benefits for all of their illnesses, especially those that take years to develop. For illnesses that are all too common for those in this room. Illnesses pass from one generation to the next, dormant, asleep, in the genes until they manifest in veterans' children. Illnesses that start slow and move very fast. Cancers, tumors, and neurological effects. Again, as you all know these too well, our veterans do not have the luxury of time when they are standing toe-to-toe with toxic exposure. That's why prevention, early detection, and adequate treatment are necessary. Today, I look forward to a challenging discussion that will help to further awareness as we seek to advance legislation to get this veteran population the benefits they rightly earn. Now, I'd like to turn to my colleagues if they have anything to say, starting with my colleague, Representative Dina Titus, who served on the Veterans Affairs Committee, offered some very important legislation. And thank you all for having me here. Wonderful sitting about Ms. Titus.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for coming and being here. Welcome to my district. And what I think of as my museum, I was pleased to be on the founding board of trustees that put this together. You know, some of our cold warriors were willing to mortgage their homes to pay for the initial museum, and it's turned into being a Smithsonian sanctioned institution, and it's just fabulous. It tells the story, the whole story, with the victims, with the scientists, with the soldiers, with the atomic culture, so that people here can know our own history, and people who visit can know that there's more to this part of the country than just bright lights and feathers and sequins. So they visit, and we've had visitors from all over the world, so it is quite the museum. I hope you'll take time to visit the Dina Titus Gallery while you're here, Mr. Ranking Member, so that would be a nice tribute. You know, I've been working on this issue for quite some time. I started working on it when I was a faculty intern with Senator Howard Cannon, who some of you may remember Howard Cannon. He said that here's a story. A soldier has come to be, through the VA, to be tested, and he has lung cancer, and they don't know what caused it, but they found out that he had been part of the training with the Smoky test. And so they traced it back to say that that radiation exposure must have caused that lung cancer. And that was way back in the 80s. And so Howard Cannon said, well, look into this. See what happened at the test site. He was a hawk, but he supported testing. But he was also from southern Utah. He was also Mormon, and a lot of the downwinders were of the Latter-day Saints Church. And so he said, let's find out the real story. And that's when we started looking at what it was like to live under the mushroom cloud. Now, over the years, Orrin Hatch became involved. We were able to get some compensation for downwinders, for sheep herders who were impacted. But it's always been harder for soldiers. And that's for several reasons. One is people thought, well, the VA will take care of that. We don't need to get engaged with any more of that. There's also something called the Ferris Doctrine, where if something happens to you while you're in service, you can't sue the government, unlike some of the soldiers who were able to sue for Agent Orange. That took time to be able to do that. And third, and what we're addressing today, is that the records just weren't there to show that some people actually were involved in the testing and how much exposure they received. Some of the records burned up in St. Louis fire. Some of them just weren't adequate. Some of them were lost. And so people had to not only fight their own diseases, but had to fight the government that they had served during the Cold War to get compensation for the illnesses that had evolved over that exposure. So working with you and trying to get some bills through Congress, we've got the Presume Act saying that if you were there and you have an illness, we're going to presume it was caused by that exposure. You don't have to prove the exact amount or prove the exact time you were there. We're going to presume that there's a connection. And so I think that will be very important. I'm hoping that we can get that passed. We had a great hearing on it, and we didn't have a lot of opposition. People said, yeah, this is only fair. Our Cold War warriors deserve our compensation as much as any others. But one other thing that's kind of hanging over all this, kind of, to pardon the pun, like a mushroom cloud, is the notion that the president has said, we're going to start testing again. Now, here in Nevada, we know the consequences of testing, whether it's in the water, in the air, the people who are at the test site, or the soldiers who were there. We don't need to start testing again. Not only does it start an international arms race, but it exposes Southern Nevadans to those dangers. So I think we need to always put in perspective that that's not the way we want to go. We want to learn from history, correct our mistakes, and not make them again. So thank you very much for this hearing, and thank all the veterans and advocates who are here with us today.
Well, thank you, Congressman Titus, for that amazing background, for your long history on this issue. I'm hopeful that we can get something done on these presumptions. I feel very, we've laid an important precedent for the PACT Act, which dealt with burn pits, dealt with some radiation-exposed veterans. So we have a precedent about if you were there, we don't think you're proof. We give you the benefit of the doubt. And I think we know who was there. We just need to get to the point where we don't make the veterans have to fight it out. It's just wrong. I think next is my colleague Stephen Horsford.
Well, good morning, and thank you to our ranking member, Mr. Takano, for being here and taking the time to visit with our constituents, the people who deserve to be heard. Today is your opportunity to speak directly to Congress, to the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I want to thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, for making this a priority, and as you said, for your steadfast leadership on so many important issues, including the passage of the Honoring Our PACT Act, which is vitally important to making sure that our veterans get the benefits that they are entitled to, and that we keep our promise as an American people to the veterans who have served. And I want to thank all of the veterans and advocates for being here today. This is an opportunity for us to hear and listen directly from you. Yesterday, obviously, was a stark reminder that we must care for our service members and veterans, not only on Memorial Day, but every single day. And today is yet another opportunity for us to do that. As a representative for the 4th Congressional District, which covers 50,000 square miles throughout Nevada, including the Nellis Air Force Base, Crete Air Force Base, the Nevada Test and Training Range, and Hawthorne Army Depot, we take great pride and responsibility in the work to fight and protect and expand benefits for both active duty service members as well as their families and for the veterans, and ensuring that you and your families have access to quality health care, to the benefits that you've earned and deserve, and all the other benefits that this nation owes you a great debt of gratitude for. So I'm eager to listen to all of you and to learn how my colleagues here today can better support you. I want to thank Congresswoman Titus for her leadership over the years on these important issues, Congresswoman Susie Lee, who is on the Appropriations Committee. Together as a delegation, we're committed to doing everything that we can. I know we have representatives from the senators' offices who are here as well. So we will work tirelessly to make sure that your voices, your concerns, and your needs are acted upon in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Horsford. And now I want to invite my colleague, Congresswoman Susie Lee, to provide her opening remarks. Congressman Lee actually served the Veterans Affairs Committee with me. Are you also on VA or?
No, I'm on defense.
You're on defense,
Yeah.
but, which is also the VA and the DOD have to actually figure this out together. So,
Absolutely.
Congressman Lee.
Well, first of all, thank you all for being here. I want to honor the veterans in the room and the advocates and the families for your service and your advocacy, making sure that we as a country do right by the men and women who put their lives on the line for our freedom. And yesterday, obviously, we all celebrated the solemn day of Memorial Day, honoring our fallen heroes. And I couldn't help but think all day yesterday of the men and women who have succumbed to the consequences of exposure unbeknownst to them, and those who have been denied or not yet given the true recognition and the benefits that they need and they've earned. And over 20 years ago, Congress passed a bill that entitled nuclear weapons workers to receive free medical treatment and fair financial compensation for specific illnesses that they contracted as a result of their work with nuclear testing and production. And the PACT Act intended to cover these veterans, but unfortunately did not include a method for veterans like those who served at NITR, Dave, Crete, and some of the men who are here in the audience. These men and women were doing work at NITR, and it was so secretive that they weren't able to prove their service and receive the health care they're entitled to. And unlike the Department of Energy, which did make sure their workers receive the benefits, the Department of Defense does not classify NITR as a location where toxic exposure occurred. That's why I helped introduce the PROTECT Act, which will ensure eligible veterans who are assigned to receive the benefits they earned. Veterans who were stationed at NITR during 1972 to 2005 have been denied these benefits. And quite honestly, it's embarrassing as a country that we have done that. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to press the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, to commit to helping these victims of toxic radiation exposure. And he committed
in public in a hearing to get back to me. He said, we will get a review as early as next week, and I'll get back to you on what the department's position will be. Well, it's been exactly 2 weeks today since that conversation. Unfortunately, the Department of Defense, again, is dragging its feet and even asking the secretary in person, sending some follow-up letters. I'm feeling like we're not getting the response we need. And as I said to the secretary, just 1 year of inaction has led to the death of 103 veterans without the care that they need, and their families without the benefits. This list grows by an average of one person every 2 days. So the urgency is here and now. We're not giving up, and I will say we have been successful at making some progress in the 26 NDAA. We were able to secure some language that would lay out a process by which we identify, and the Department of Defense will coordinate with the VA. And again, in the fiscal year 27 MILCOM VA bill, we did get additional language in it. But honestly, it's not enough, and it's not fast enough. And we're not going to give up until we get the benefits that the men and women who literally, unbeknownst to them and their families, rightfully earn. So thank you all for being here. I want to thank the ranking member for taking the time to come to Nevada. We have such a rich history here in our state of our commitment to our national security, and of course all of the veterans who live here and their families. And so it's really meaningful for us that you've taken the time to come and listen to the concerns of everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Lee. I just got to say, I'm just so impressed with this delegation. I was honored to be invited on behalf of your veteran constituents. It's very moving, and I know a lot of your senators have been doing similar work, and you've been doing this on a bipartisan basis. I know that you also work with your Republican colleagues as well. I'm going to call on the participants one by one, but we want to give you as much time to speak in the main portion, but you just briefly at this moment introduce yourself, your organization, discipline as you do. Keep it as brief as you can. Daniel Saunders, and I think
Good morning, sir. My name is Daniel Sanders. I enlisted in the Air Force in 1985. I retired in 2006. My assignments included McClellan Air Force Base, Sacramento, Upper Hayford, England, and also Nellis Air Force Base. And that's where I retired out from. After retirement, I became a government servant for the Department of the Air Force. Since joining the VFW in 2013, I've served as the post commander, a district commander, also the state commander. I am now currently the National Legislative Representative for Nevada. The VFW Legislative Service works with Congress and federal agencies to protect veterans' benefits, health care, and the quality of life of the active duties. We fight for their benefits and their rights. Chairman Takano, I thank you very much for authoring the PACT Act. It was a huge accomplishment. We appreciate that greatly. That was a huge step forward. Camp Lejeune was a great portion to add to it, but that just leads on. There's a lot more locations that we need to address, and that's why it's benefiting here today. So one of the things is on the Nevada test training range, if you were a DOE person, they've acknowledged and said you have been exposed. A Department of Defense person standing side by side are not even acknowledged because, one, they've signed a non-disclosure statement, says they are not allowed to talk about what they have done. The Department of Defense will say national security, they never existed. So those are some of the hurdles that we're hoping that this body can fix. Thank you, sir.
thank you, Daniel Sanders. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Kari, is it
Weninger.
Weninger?
Yeah.
Okay, I was guessing.
It's a fun last name to figure out.
All right, Kari, go ahead.
Well, good morning. I'm Kari Weninger. I am the chair of the board for the Veteran Families for Education.
Kari, would you hold the microphone closer? We want to make sure it gets out. Just pull it closer.
Perfect. All right. I am the chair of the board for Veteran Families for Education and Awareness. I was one of the founding board members several years ago. I grew up in the Navy. My father retired after 25 plus years as a test pilot. I also was a military spouse for 15 years in the Air Force. I've called the beautiful state of Nevada home since 2003, but obviously growing up in the Navy, I was worldwide. First of all, I want to thank Representative Horsford for bringing up the families. That is a cause that's near and dear to our hearts, is making sure the families have a voice. Forgive me, I'm gonna have to read from my notes so I don't forget anything. I'm notorious for that. VFA greatly appreciates the implementation of the EILR, and to better address the operational, occupational, environment, and toxic exposures to our military, especially exposures not specifically addressed in the PACT Act, and to improve healthcare, streamline the claims process, and increase understanding of the exposure effects through research, VFA recommends the following enhancements to EILR. Increase transparency and collaboration with VSOs, stakeholders, including family members. Add veteran access to their individual EILR records. Add a method for access for approved family members, guardians, and survivors. Implement user-friendly method to add or correct information on one's record. And finally, add individual EILR records for family members who are vulnerable to possible health care risks from an exposed military veteran or who were directly exposed to toxins at bases such as Atsugi, Japan, and Red Hill.
Thank you, Kari. Do you know the actual acronym that EILR stands for?
Yes.
Can you say what it is?
Individual longitudinal exposure record.
For those who are watching, and those who may not be familiar, that's the Department of Defense's tool to track both the environmental and occupational exposure to toxic harm.
Correct.
So we try to keep a record on where veterans, what kind of work they did, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what EILR does. We hear that with years too. Okay. Next, thank you very much. Kiefer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for what this opportunity to share with you. I really appreciate all of the work that you have done on toxic exposure.
Pull the mic closer to you.
I appreciate all the work that you've done on toxic exposure. Sometimes making the sausage in Washington, D.C. is a real messy business. So, as he said, my name is Kiefer. I have the blessing of being the national commander of the National Association of Atomic Veterans. Our definition of atomic veterans is wider than the VA's or any other organizations. We basically focus on individuals that have been exposed to ionization radiation or had the opportunity to be exposed to ionization radiation and depleted uranium. One of the newest groups that we're focusing on trying to advocate for is those individuals that were part of the humanitarian efforts for the Fukushima disaster and those that were based in Japan. There's other things that we deal with that are veterans related with in terms of some of the inconsistencies. Give you a perfect example. Medicare. Well, first of all, healthcare. Under Obamacare, VA healthcare is considered credible health insurance. Under Medicare, it's not considered credible health care. I've been working for the last 3 years to try and find out, is that a rule or a legislative matter to figure out how to change that. I'd like somebody to explain to me what's substandard about the VA healthcare that doesn't make it credible healthcare. Now, the significance of that is if a veteran decides not to sign up for Medicare Part B at the age of 65 and it doesn't have other health care coverage, and they do decide to sign up for Medicare at a later date, they have a higher premium. And I believe that's a disservice to the veterans in that VA healthcare should be considered credible healthcare, and they shouldn't be penalized because they didn't sign up for Medicare Part D at the age of 65. So, anyhow, my background is or significance is I was part of the Inuitak Atoll radiological cleanup project, and I could tell you a number of different things about that. I often tell people that was either the best planned operation for plausible deniability or the worst planned operation. So, and I can share with you why that was. So, go ahead. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Keith, and I think we did take care of the Inuitak Atoll veterans under the PACT Act.
Yes, it was included in the PACT Act as well as Palomar, Spain, and Thule, Greenland. And currently, we're trying to get them included under RECA, which is the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. And I can share with you the difference between the two programs if you're interested at a later time.
Yeah, let's move on. And this Medicare issue, thank you for bringing that up. I'm becoming more aware of it, having reached Medicare age last year. So the joys of learning about sorting all that out. Rick Workman.
Oh, yes.
I don't always speak very clearly. Good morning, Ranking Member Takano and distinguished guests and members, and it's great to see all of you here. I know Dina, Titus, she doesn't know me, but I know her from seeing so many times, seen her video. And one last thing, and not part of my comments, but it reminded me, she wrote a book years ago. Let's talk about there's a bomb in your backyard. When I said that, I had worked at Nellis Air Force Base in another program way back when we had a lot of munitions, and I thought, damn, she gave the secret away. So I want to thank you very much for allowing me to testify today. I am Rick Workman. I'm founder of the all-volunteer ad hoc The Sound of Silence Project. I'm speaking on behalf of over 30,000 veterans from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps who all work these weapons throughout the world. The nuclear weapons technicians maintain all nuclear weapons deployed throughout the Department of Defense from 1945 through 1991, which is the designated for the Cold War area. And we worked in secret and in silence through that entire time. Quite frankly, there are still members right now who have told me within days they will never speak about what they did during their Cold War years with nuclear weapons. Never. My wife and I buried a good friend of ours 2 years ago. He took those secrets to the grave. He was my boss a long time ago. We were good friends. He still would not speak about it. We are fighting for veterans' benefits due to ionizing radiation that we did not know until at least the retired veterans likely did not know where it was being emitted through the surfaces of all nuclear weapons 24 hours a day continuously at all times that we were in close physical proximity to these nuclear weapons. We not only were in close proximity, we hugged them. There's a B-61 out there when you see it standing up. Imagine standing there and literally hugging it in the display. But we tore it apart somewhat, just short of removing the pit, and we replaced time change items, and then we put it back together with a lot of testing, maintenance, and other procedures that were involved. Again, at all times, unknowingly, we were bombarded with gamma and neutron radiation directly from the exterior surfaces of those live nuclear weapons. 4 months after my 17th birthday, I dropped out of high school and I joined the Air Force. Some of my duties and experiences afterwards included enlisted and commissioned nuclear weapons specialist, technician, supervisor, and manager. I ended up as a senior, and when I say senior, it's not a rank, I was the senior nuclear weapons technical inspector for the Defense Nuclear Agency Field Command. Our responsibilities were to inspect all nuclear capabilities in the world Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, including submarines. I even did 9 days at sea on the Nimitz, and I've been inside numerous submarines in 2 different types. I served also at the Tonopah Test Range, and you refer to it. There it is. But and then I also served. I served there with the stealth fighter program. I was the maintenance commander. I was in charge of all maintenance of all stealth fighter aircraft. And for 3 months, I was deployed in the tail end of Desert Storm, where I also was the commander for maintenance and did the same over there. I also served our local community. Just a kind of a side note, I worked for the Las Vegas Metro PD, and I started the Henderson Forensic Crime Lab from scratch and then run that for almost 20 years. As far as nuclear weapons technicians, our tasks were direct physical contact, hands and arms inside the weapons, which I mentioned earlier, near the openings, and our torsos quite frequently pressed against the weapons when we were doing maintenance tasks. Technicians were exposed to gamma and neutron radiation. Again, I said through the weapon surface. Cold War weapons technicians were not told about this radiation. We did not give consent, and we couldn't decline because we had no idea that this radiation existed. Nuclear weapons related personnel radiation safety programs were not established formally until 29 October 1990. That's when the Air Force released their very first document admitting there was radiation emitting from these nuclear weapons. The Army, Navy, and the Marine Corps, which it's hard to find these days, they have never, to the best of my knowledge, officially acknowledged it. However, most of them have lost primarily all of their weapons. Technicians literally rubbed plutonium and uranium components, not with their bare hands necessarily, but with gloved hands, and that was to remove spalling particles, which happens in the corrosion process when plutonium and uranium decay over the, in some cases, over millions of years. When they did that, it released alpha radiation particles. This alpha radiation particles also has a lot to do with the contamination of the Tonopah Test Range. And those particles are 20 times the microscopic particles. They don't go very far when they're being emitted from a radiation source. However, they pretty much don't go away. They are, I think I just said, they were 20 times more powerful than gamma and neutron radiation. And if ingested, breathe into your lungs, they never leave, particularly in your lungs. The federal government has made statements that if you have alpha particles in your lungs, in 50 years, you will still have 80% of those alpha particles still in your lungs. Ionizing radiation. Ionizing radiation exposure causes numerous cancers, genetic mutations of our DNA, fertility issues. Thank you. I feel like I'm a radio announcer now. Ionizing radiation exposure causes or contributes to cancers, genetic mutations, fertility issues, birth defects.
I meant for us to have introductions, so we can come back to you.
Okay.
And you can
I got
finish what
this
you're
much
saying.
left.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I handle that?
Yeah.
Mutated DNA can be passed through the reproductive process, and I will say that it's kind of disgusting to talk about it. But a lot of female technicians, nuclear weapons technicians, have told me personally, and I know of many more of them who have had miscarriages, and then when what was miscarried was examined, it was pretty much disgusting. Nuclear weapons technicians' duties are not considered a radiation risk activity, and we are not considered radiation exposed veterans. We also handled more than 50 different toxic carcinogenic chemicals that were required for use by the Department of Energy, the Atomic Energy Commission, and the Department of Defense. And we are not considered as toxic exposed veterans by the Title 38 U.S. Code as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Workman. By the way, just before we go, can you just explain what the pit is?
Yes, when we refer to the pit, that is the core, generally the core component. Sometimes there's more in the live nuclear weapons, and it's the plutonium or the uranium. There are other cores in a different type of weapon called a gun type weapon that has two portions of typically uranium that are literally slammed together by explosives. That is also, we also kind of consider that the core, because that contains the materials that allows that operation. The little boy, if you're familiar with the two weapons we dropped over Japan, the little boy was a similar gun type weapon.
Thank you. You want to say? Okay. Linda Chase. Sorry, just pull the microphone up close to you. That big one.
Yes, I'm Linda Chase, and I am representing downwinders from Southern Nevada. My family moved here from Michigan in 1955, just as the test site was getting underway. So we were here from the beginning for the above ground testing, which we could see from our front yard. We could see the flash of the test and then the mushroom cloud rising up. And like many Southern Nevadans, we were very proud to be serving on the front lines of the Cold War. And we were assured by the government that it posed no serious health concerns. That, of course, as we now know, proved not to be the case. And as people started getting sick, and I was one of those people that developed an autoimmune disease that was a chronic and almost fatal disease, and then my father also died of bladder cancer, the government changed its position from there's no health concerns to, well, you really can't prove causation. You really can't prove that those illnesses were caused by radiation exposure. And that's a position they pretty much adhered to until 1990, when the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act was passed, RECA. And that's what I'm involved with now. I'm working with the Union of Concerned Scientists, their RECA committee, to try to expand the coverage to include people previously excluded. And one of those groups happens to be the populous area. Most of Las Vegas in Clark County still is not included in the RECA bill. So we're trying to get an amendment through that will include that long neglected group that was one of the original downwinders, but curiously still is not represented in that very important legislation. As for my military background, I was for a summer served as a travel agent at Nellis Air Force Base. I arranged commercial travel for military personnel that were going through Nellis, or had to be someplace and there was no military transport. So I spent a summer working there and saw some of the inside workings of that, and met service people who also, because of the way RECA is currently constituted, would not be eligible for coverage under that bill. So we're continuing to work for that passage, and our Congress people have been very good about pressing for that, and they've been blocked at several turns. There was a RECA bill that Senator Hawley was promoting that was passed by the Senate, but it didn't get to the House floor because Speaker Johnson wouldn't bring the bill to the floor. So there was another version that eventually got through as part of the Big Beautiful bill, but again, Clark County was not, or most of Clark County was not included as part of that bill. So that's our continued goal, is to try to right that wrong that has been existed for so long.
Oh, go ahead, Dina.
I would just add to that the expansion of the coverage. We're working with Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico to also not only include Clark County, but some of the uranium miners that you find in New Mexico. Right. Actually, the current version, we were able to get some New Mexico, the most of Navajo included, which included the people that were there for the Trinity test, but also the uranium miners, which I wasn't aware of. But, generations of Navajo went to those mines and mined uranium and became, very ill. Many of them still are struggling with illnesses. So that was a really important legislation.
legislation that passed, and we're proud of that victory. And we thank everybody that supported that, but we still have these people, the people of Southern Nevada still remain underrepresented in the RICA coverage.
Thank you, Linda Chase. Joaquin Enriquez.
Good morning. Joaquin Enriquez, interim program manager for the LA County Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, Veteran Services Division. Our program recognizes that military service impacts not only the individuals who serve, but also the families who stand beside them throughout that journey. Spouses, children, caregivers, and survivors often carry the long-term emotional, financial, and social effects of military service long after deployments and or uniforms come off. Supporting veterans, therefore, also means supporting the people and families connected to them. Our work focuses on helping military-connected families navigate challenges that often feel overwhelming and isolating. Many families come to us during periods of crisis, transition, grief, or uncertainty, and our responsibility is to ensure that they are met with guidance, compassion, and connection to the support systems available throughout Los Angeles County. Whether a family is navigating the effects of trauma, housing instability, justice involvement, caregiving responsibilities, or the loss of a loved one, our program strives to provide a coordinated, collaborative, and human-centered approach to support them. A major part of our effort includes collaboration through the Veteran Peer Access Network, or VPAN, which helps strengthen connections between veterans, families, peers, and community-based organizations. This program has helped create a more accessible and relationship-driven support network where veterans and their loved ones can connect with trusted peers who understand the unique challenges associated with military service and transition. This peer-based approach often reduces stigma, improves engagement, and builds stronger community connections for families who may otherwise feel disconnected from available resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Mary Grace Velasco.
Good morning, everyone.
Pull that mic a lot closer.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for convening this.
Just got to pull it real close to your, it just doesn't pick up.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for convening this important discussion and for your continued leadership on radiation exposure issues. Radiation exposure shows us exactly why ending the wait matters. Our report found that toxic exposed veterans wait on average more than 3 decades for the VA presumptives, but radiation exposed veterans often wait longer. I forgot to say who I was. My name is Mary Grace Velasco. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. Go U.S. Navy. For 15 years, I am a National Service Officer for disabled American veterans. I help countless veterans file for claims on a daily basis and assist their families as well. Thank you for having me here. From Hiroshima and Nagasaki to atmospheric nuclear testing, service members were exposed in environments where dosimeters were missing, inaccurate, or never issued at all. Many exposures were classified, meaning veterans couldn't even tell their doctors or their families what they experienced. Today, many radiation claims still fail for one simple reason. Veterans are asked to prove individual radiation doses they were never given the tools to measure. Our report calls this a type 2 exposure radiation problem, uncertain or inadequate. And it's one of the clearest examples of a system that places the burden of government failure onto the veteran. The PACT Act was a historic step forward, but it did not fix this structural problem. Too many veterans, especially those connected to test ranges, cleanup missions, support roles, DoD civilians, and nearby civilian populations, are still outside the tent when it comes to radiation, recognized and benefits. DAV believes that when exposure is plausible, documented at the population level, and supported by emerging health evidence, the system must err on the side of the veteran, not demand proof that never existed. This is how we truly end the wait. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Mary Grace. That was really, I left that last part of it. Steve Nelson.
Good morning. I'm Steve Nelson. I'm with the Stronghold Freedom Foundation. I'm the Government Affairs Director. Once again, thank you, Ranking Member Takano, for allowing me to speak on behalf of 16,000 K2 veterans that served our country in its time of immediate need after 9/11. Once again, in my best SoCal surfer voice, I'm super stoked to be here. I'm a 28-year Air Force navigator, retiree. I spent 11 years in Air Force Special Operations C-130s, 17 in the Texas Air National Guard C-130s, and it's in 2004 that I got to spend my time at K2. I'm glad actually that I went a little bit after a lot of you because I didn't really know a lot of the stories for the radiation folks out here. And what I'm hearing so far is a lot of you guys are very similar to where we were at K2 back in around 2020. K2 closed in 2005, and until 2021 or so, K2 was not even listed as a deployable location in the CFRs. As a result, no burn pit registry, no anything. So I feel for you. I know where you're at. It gets better, but for us, it took legislation to do so. And also getting things in the NDAA. We've come a long way since then, but we do have a long way to go. I know today we're focused on radiation exposures. K2 was one of those places that had many exposures, including radiation. It wasn't the primary focus, but it was there. One of the things we fight, again, that's very similar to many of you, is that the DOD has denied any exposure for us to enriched uranium. They say there was depleted uranium there, but not enriched uranium. And that's a whole different subject. And certainly, I would say less toxic. The DOD is wrong. At the end of the day, though, the real question is, does it matter? And if so, why? And should it matter? We'll talk about that a little bit more, but I've got a declaration by Dr. Gordon Peters, who was the chief surgeon at K2 at the time in 2001, when things first started going awry with people's health. And I'll talk more about that as we go, but I want to move on.
Yeah, Steve, just very quickly, so people don't know what K2 is, help me explain it. Where's K2 and what's the issue?
K2 is Karshi-Kanabad, Uzbekistan. It was the first place that we had boots on the ground after 9/11. They used it as a jumping off point. It was an old Soviet base that I believe the Soviets also used for their Afghanistan operations in the 80s. But we took over from 2001 to 2005.
And at that base, they had nuclear. Why was it radioactive?
Well, I can go into that if you like.
No, it doesn't have to be really long. But the idea is that our service members didn't know.
No, absolutely
that
not.
where they were being stationed was a problem.
Yes,
I just want to make sure we explain that.
Yeah, when we first got there, there was they found chemical weapons, nerve agent in the soil. Veterans were getting sick, working in the hazes. Chemical detectors were going off, so they cordoned those off. There were signs all over the base about "Don't go here." They were written in Uzbek and Russian. So there was a lot of that going on. So they brought in a U.S. CHIPM team from Europe to investigate.
That's right.
That's where we can go into more.
I just want to make sure people know, kind of got the idea of what K2 represented. So finally, Dave Crete. Finally, but not least, Dave Crete.
You've avoided me so far. So my name's Dave Crete. I am an Air Force veteran. I served on the unbelievable place called Knitter. It's funny for us because only in Congress have we ever heard Knitter. But I served there and it was a great honor. It was an amazing job. I was 18 years old. Couldn't get a cooler assignment. Before I get on to the rest of it, I want to say a couple of things first. Congressman Takano, Ranking Member Takano, our first roundtable was just over a year ago. What has happened since that roundtable a year ago for our organization has been fantastic. So I thank you. Congresswoman Susie Lee, No one should ever question her tenacity when she wants an answer to something. You became the hero of a whole bunch of guys 2 weeks ago today. And thank you for that, because that was something. And the Presume Act is very important to us. And we appreciate that. Congressman Horsford, it's a great opportunity to meet you. Never am I told I'm not loud enough. Even my football coach's voice, I guess, doesn't work here. No, I just want to thank everybody, because you've all been so important to what we're doing, and we truly appreciate it. I think the best example that I can give of why I'm here, 2 reasons. First is my family, who some get to be here today, and I'm very appreciative of that. And anybody who thinks this doesn't affect the family, let me educate you. It changed our chromosomes, it changed our DNA. So we brought it home. That was our gift to our kids as a member of the military. Some of our guys are here. Some of my board members are here. Congresswoman Lee, you've had the opportunity to meet them before. These guys are sick. They lead a life none of us want. And they're happy to wake up every day. This board that I had printed 2 weeks ago has 563 names of people that we know that served on NTTR and that have died. Sadly, it's out of date. We've added 10 names that are not yet on that board. That board was printed 2 weeks ago today. Just think about that. It's not that they've all died in the last 2 weeks. We found out about them. One of them did die. He was having many strokes, and he finally committed suicide. Let that sink in. Yet the Department of Defense says we were never there because there isn't there, therefore we weren't exposed. Therefore, we're not eligible for our veterans benefits. The military has been on NTTR since January 27th, 1951. It's 75 years. But there's no urgency. The secretary needs to have this poster in his office. If somebody thinks there's no urgency. We have bills in Congress and the House and Senate right now. Thankfully, all of our delegation signed on. There's more coming because we're going to fix this problem. And it needs to be fixed. And we're honored to have you here. It's nice for you to fly this way, Congressman Takano, instead of the other way around, but I'll be there next week. Most everybody here has heard our story. But what I want to express is the urgency. In 2 weeks, we're going to get 10 more names than that. Will there be somebody else that committed suicide because they're tired of being sick? Will there be somebody else who's got an incurable lung problem that just since I saw him 2 weeks ago, he updates me to tell me it's worse? We have the power to do something when we work together on this. And I just thank you all for your attention to this. It's important. These people are important. And we exist. And that's something maybe the DOD doesn't like. But it is our reality. And it's going to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Well, what the DOD likes is that the American people appreciate the whole service members. People, I'll speak for my colleagues as well. I know what we've talked a lot about data masking being the issue with these claims, and I have several questions. How has this made your efforts more difficult, data masking? Has anyone made you aware of the Restricted Access Claims Department what would be a solution to this roadblock? So if you have a response to that, raise your card. Dave, you have your card up. I see. I can't see the name. Well, my staff will tell me. Go ahead.
So, data masking, for those that don't know, means our records stay classified. One of the issues with those of us that were stationed on NTTR is we have the unique, I don't know how you want to put it, but compared to the other branches of services and people at other jobs, I've been data masked for 38 years. Even Delta Force doesn't get data masked that long. I did a FOIA request to get my records, Congressman, and all I got was that I had a pre-enlistment physical and I had knee surgery one day, and those were the only 2 times I'd seen a doctor in 6 years. And one of them was actually before I went in. So we can't verify what we've done. The DOD doesn't turn over the names to the VA. They have them, just like our records exist. They don't give them to us. And they won't verify with the VA that we were somewhere that was toxic. Even though the Department of Energy says it is. That masking hides all of our records, and that's how they prevent us from being able to obtain our veterans benefits. That's how they hide us in plain sight, by keeping that data masked. So it's a huge problem for us. That is a firewall for us that we've yet to be able to get through.
Kiefer.
Well, data masking has been a problem for quite some time. Your doctor about your past experiences to give them clues as to how to properly treat it. In Kentucky, told you were sent over as a DUI, so it didn't show up on your DD 214. There's just a number of different cases in which the information, information is either masked or not controlled. I believe there was a little bit of the progress made with recent. Recently, there was a meeting with Senator Arms and Rose and Kane, in which we were told by General Kane that he was going to be working to try and remove that red tape, allowing veterans to finally get coverage they earn. I myself have had problems getting my records, and I was told that they were burned up in the St. Louis fire. Now that's a tremendous fire that can burn records before the grave. I've been told that a lot of the individuals that are exposed to ionization radiation, their records are being kept in Virginia out at Kiefer. So, there's a lot of things going on that makes it very difficult for veterans to get their records and make them easy to use.
Thank you, Keith. Rick Workman.
Thank you. We didn't have, as far as nuclear weapons technicians, we didn't have the same type of data masking. However, everything was pretty much masked, not necessarily our location. However, wherever we were with live nuclear weapons, the location was either secret or top secret, depending on whether we were in the U.S. or overseas. So, in all of our evaluations, I actually had, when I was enlisted for almost 12 years, and none of my enlisted evaluations, I actually recently went through those, working on nuclear weapons, none of them had the word nuclear. Not one. There's one indication because I had a degree that had the word nuclear in it, but nothing to do with our job, or actual job. So it's very tough to, and with dosimeters, the dosimeter readings were, we were not issued dosimeters. If you issue a dosimeter to someone that's working nuclear weapons, there's going to be a tracking. There's got to be some tracking methods. In the Air Force, I've seen a couple of people that said that they had, perhaps after the Cold War, in over the 18 years that I worked in live nuclear weapons or managed them, we did not. I was never issued a dosimeter. When I worked for the Defense Nuclear Agency, they finally they issued us dosimeters. However, I didn't know a soul, and I worked with a bunch of warrant officers and other officers from the Navy, Army, and Marines that had worked with nuclear weapons. Pretty much none of them had ever worked with a dosimeter unless they were on fire watch for the nuclear power plant on ships and submarines.
Thank you, Rick. Daniel Sanders.
So one of the things is, when I was in the Air Force, we were put on a program called PRP, Personnel Reliability Program. That really didn't say much other than the fact it restricted medically what you were given. So if you did work on nukes or were exposed to nukes, you were put on that PRP program. Basically, any kind of medication would, after 72 hours, would automatically, you would have to go back to a panel for medications. So they just wanted to restrict you what you could take, just for preventive cautions. So your question about data max, really, one of the Department of Defense says it's national security. They don't want to give out the numbers. Understand that. They don't want to show what their footprint is or what they do. What we are trying to say is we do not want to divulge any of that information. All we want to be is recognize that if I was a data mass person, that you would be presumed that you were exposed. Now, if the Department of Defense wants to come back and say, no, that person was never actually there or never exposed, then let them tell us that that person was not. But if the Department of Defense wants to make it easy, just say, if you're data masked, we presume that you were exposed to toxins, and leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve Nelson.
Data masking was a big issue for our first responders in K2, the first boots on the ground in 2001. They showed up in the beginning of October after 9/11, so it was only a couple, 3 weeks after they arrived. And they were all special operations forces. And as you can imagine, they were all data masks. DOD says they know some, but certainly in the cohort that we are able to follow, I can tell you they don't know all. They say that the VA has the ability to go in a classified setting to look at their records to see where they were. If the VA does that, they are not effective. So if there is a process as they say there is, that process needs to be greatly enhanced. My gut feeling is that certainly in that time frame, that in the chaos that ensued in getting boots on the ground out that direction, that a lot of people are going to be missed. So in the DOD's records, it hasn't been that.
So there's reason to believe that the Department of Defense has data and lists of people who were likely exposed, probably exposed to radiation in a number of different settings. That information is not getting to the Department of Veterans Affairs.
100%.
That's what we say is data masking. Data exists, but it's been masked. As you have been fighting this fight, have you found surprising allies? Have you highlighted any areas where people want to work to solve this issue, but have had their hands tied administratively? Anybody, Rick Workman, you have thoughts or experiences with that? Once we get that microphone with you, over. Sorry about this microphone situation.
But we have competing resources. We are competing against the same resource. So if we have multiple groups who have a great need to have legislation completed, approved, and signed. However, usually in many cases it seems, from my point of view, to be a point of planet. People are dying. Somebody mentioned, and we have literally hundreds of people probably die within every week in our organization. But the resources aren't getting. We're not able to capture or get someone
had any experiences, in your advocacy where you've met people who want to help you, within the administration, but have had their hands tied administrative? That's my question. If no one can respond to that, we'll just move on. What is the effect on the family when someone brings home a toxic exposure? Some of you already commented on this. Kari, where's Kari? Kari, you have something to say? Go ahead. Let's make sure we get that out of the way. Is that mic working?
I can speak to it personally. Toxic exposure, I know Dave's going to touch on it, bringing it home from the workplace. It is also on the basis. I personally was exposed. I'm a cancer survivor. I have chronic illness that we don't know where it came from. There is no treatment. Eventually, I will probably be disabled to the point where I'm bedridden. So, unfortunately, I'm not recognized because I never served. So, when I get to that point, my civilian insurance ends. So, there's a lot of families, hundreds of stories out there in the same situation. So there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement to the family members' independence, as well as some sort of way of helping them. There are countless military bases. We've seen Camp Lejeune, a couple others acknowledged recently, but there are so many others, and there needs to be a better system of identifying these bases that are toxic to family members, and then getting them the help.
Thank you, Kari. Keith, let's get the microphone. Let's see, is that microphone? Well, sure, so, okay.
I didn't know I was that hard to hear. There's a number of different aspects to this, and many of them fall in under the category of psychological effect. Not only did many of these veterans experience situations that had psychological effects on them. In fact, that was many of the tests that they ran was to see the psychological effects of atomic bombs on them and whether the particular veterans could perform after being in the area of an atomic bomb. They'd have them in trenches, they have the atomic bomb go off, and then they'd march them to ground zero. This other psychological, going through that has caused many of the veterans to have trauma, psychological trauma. Also, when they have children that wind up having birth defects or come down with unusual health concerns, they have the psychological effect of, it's my fault. My DNA was changed. I didn't have any control over them, but that was passed on my children, and that was passed on to my children's children, and often this goes on for 7 generations. Not only is there that, but there's also the financial aspect. So that many of these individuals are in a situation that they can't hold down a full-time job, or if they do, they're not as effective as they know now. That has a financial effect on them, on the family. Often these various aspects are not taken into consideration or understood by the general populace.
Thank you. Dave Crete.
Thank you, sir. To address this, in our family, my first son was born with something called neurofibromatosis. When we took him to the doctor, we were told he had a 1 in 50,000 chance of getting that at birth, and they called him a spontaneous mutation. Pretty wild thing to have a doctor tell you. Our second son was born with something called hypostasis. He was corrected surgery at 6 months old.
From a claim standpoint, I do file assist widowers, filing claims for disability benefits, for survivors' benefits, and it does affect them greatly when there's no evidence that the cause of death is due to a presumptive condition or a radiation exposure. So it does affect them greatly financially, their mental health well-being. Most of them, that is their only income. So when their husband or wife passes away from these illnesses and they can't prove that this was due to an exposure, it's not a good thing, and something has to be done.
So thank you, Mary Grace. You're connecting this, the way that the benefits are structured to something key you mentioned earlier about financial consequences of these exposures. I want to move on to another topic. I'd like to discuss some of the legislative proposals my colleagues have presented. We have the Forgotten Veterans Act, the NDA amendment that didn't make it through, the Presume Act from my colleague right here, Representative Titus, Representative Amadei's bill to create a presumption for you all. How do you feel about this legislation? Go ahead.
The Presume Act. The Presume Act will solve one of the problems in the original intent of the presumption is that if you have one of these diseases, it was caused by this. You shouldn't have to have the additional burden of how much radiation did you get, when did you get it, and so on and so on and so forth. I'll contrast RICA with the implemented with the RICA. If you were there, it's presumed you're exposed. If you have that disease, it's presumed that it was due to the radiation. Now the difference is with RICA, if you fill out the paperwork correctly and meet the qualifications, generally you'll have a one-time check in hand within 6 to 12 months. Our experience is it's 14 years to perfect the claim of the VA on average. The VA, their denial rate is 86% for ionization radiation, whereas with RICA it's 41%.
Thank you very much, and thank your association for giving us some support for that legislation. It is based on RICA. They use radio epidemiological evidence, and that's evidence that you can't prove a direct link. A lot of people don't have cancer. Not all those people were exposed to radiation, but we know if you were exposed to radiation, epidemiological research shows you're likely to get cancer. So if you can use that kind of statistic to show it and presume that that's the case, instead of having to show that direct causation, then you can get the benefit. That's what they do with RICA, and that's test site workers, downwinders, and that's what they should do. So thank you.
Daniel Sanders.
Some of the biggest, huge things about between the Senate and the House, what you guys are doing is bringing to light that there is a problem and we need to address this. I know in the past years we've had very little support for any of these bills. So hopefully it'll gain traction and actually make it move farther and get resolved.
Thank you, Dan. That's why this roundtable actually in Nevada, so close to the NTPR, the better site, I thought was so important for us to begin to raise awareness for getting some national media commentators to actually zero in and to focus on this issue. Oh, I see. Rick, go ahead.
Something on the lines of what you've already mentioned. There's federal government documentation that states for cancer induction, increasing the radiation dose does not necessarily increase the severity, but it increases the chance of getting that cancer. And then it goes on to say, excuse me, that cancers caused by radiation are completely indistinguishable from those who were not. Cancers caused by radiation are completely indistinguishable from those that seem to occur spontaneously or caused by other or known suspected carcinogens. In other words, you cannot disassociate becoming cancerous from ionizing radiation. No method, and I think
Thank you very much. Linda Chase, your car was up, but I want you to maybe elaborate on the downwinders.
Yeah, the downwinders in Nevada, as I said, were, people moved here, wanting to come and look at the test site. They went to school at the public test site kids, they were classmates, their families were fathers and always at the test site. So it was very much a part of our lives. The lockdown testing was then the testing moved underground, but there were still issues with exposure to the disease. Cases of a very testing of disease and poor workers that were exposed, that were exposed, they all belonged to the alcohol so their families sued the government. And the government's position was, or had been, well, that's unfortunate, but it's not our fault. We can't prove causation. That those cases of leukemia were caused by that exposure. Even though that really happened. So the government won that case. And it wasn't until 1990 after the research that the government, thanks to the bipartisan member on the part of the House and Senate, said, yeah, we'd have to take responsibility for this. But that's only we did. We came in and were able to apply for compensation based on certain illnesses that they, family members, had suffered from. So the principle was essential. The government still had responsibility for what happened. However, they managed to slip or secure the net in some cases. Ironically, start going to the own there. Well, yes, there was some closure, but legally can't afford to cover these costs that are to standpoint of really other costs where good with exposure from downwind effects of testing. One of them was Northern Utah. Northern Utah was covered individually, but Southern Utah was not. And that's where St. Georgia ground zero for radiation exposure to New Mexico. So a lot of areas were affected downwind were not covered. So even though the officials took responsibility, the practical terms, they kind of fought every urging to expand the coverage to people. Georgia, as you mentioned, uranium,
this point, I just want to invite, without question, probably any comments that people want to make at this point, points we haven't covered. Dan, let's get that microphone. Members, my colleagues, want to chime in. Go ahead.
So one of the thoughts is, you ask questions about exposure. For the dinner, let's take a look at, project double tracks or clean slate. Both were basically the dirty bombs that they were experimenting with. Those were done in like 1963 roughly. Double tracks was not cleaned up until late 1990s. So all that exposure and all that stuff was just laying on the surface. Your clean slates, they were approximately in the early 60s, and they didn't finish the cleanup on it until mid 2015, 2010. So all that stuff was basically out there in the wind being exposed and blowing around. So you talk about exposure, that is a huge number for a huge amount of people that worked on that knitter that were exposed to that. Every time the wind blows, somebody was probably exposed. And a lot of your atomic problems come from breathing your dust and stuff like that, and it's been inhaled. That's where you get more of your cancers. So I know some of the folks, what they have told me is they don't know, they don't say if I get cancer. Their question more is when and what type of cancer, and are they going to survive? That is some of the folks that I have talked to, and that's what they have said.
Steve Nelson.
I want to touch on one thing. I think Kari mentioned earlier when it comes to these exposures, and that's Tyler. I think it's very important, and it is changing. I know active duty now can see their ILA record, but they're supposedly moving forward maybe with veterans and also veterans' families. I think it's important to track these things, and I think that needs to be a focus to work on, ILA 2.0.
Is data masking, how does either interact with the data masking?
That's a good question.
That's kind of what I want to know. Is,
Yeah,
I
that
can
would be a
imagine
question.
DOD is changing their ways completely. So again, what either means, Kari, can you help us just one more time? Pull that microphone in front of you. Just, what is the acronym for EILER again? So supposedly every military service member is supposed to have an EILER. That EILER is tracking of where they've served. So a service member can look back at their service history and say, I was here, 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 here. And if we identify an occupational hazard, environmental hazard, K2 is an example of a place you were located, a base, Kazakhstan, is it? Or, Uzbekistan. So if we we can look at that record and then associate that record with possible exposures, whether it's chemical, whether it's radiation, whether it's burn pits, and be able to take a look at how their VA benefits are going to work once they leave the military.
I would say that don't let perfect be the enemy of good. You're not going to necessarily capture everybody, but you can capture, tomorrow you could capture a large percentage of folks out there. Make a big difference as far as data masking and working that issue. As we talked about earlier, that's between the DOD and the VA and how they process that information and get it to the VA. And none of us probably are involved in that. So, it's the big secret. We'll leave that for you and
Okay.
getting to the bottom.
Keith Kiefer, you're next.
Earlier you had asked about presumptives, and Representative Titus also was talking about that.
situation is there. There's also the situation between, there's some things covered with VA, there's things that aren't covered with RICA, and you would think that the two presumptive lists should be the same. There was a government epidemiologist, Susan Thal. She did a study on the effects of the individuals out at, I think they call it Kiefer now. And they ended up, they were studying prostate cancer, and they found that of the veterans that were outed that have been at Nevada test site is what I've always referred to as. But they ended up having a 20% higher incidence of dying from prostate cancer. Now, I think Susan Thal, it was great the work she did, but she didn't take it far enough. I think if she hadn't looked at the situation in terms of how many of the veterans contracted prostate cancer but didn't die from it, that percentage would be much higher. There's a number of things on the presumptive list, like reproductive issues, autoimmune diseases, sorry, I have a drink right here, man. Peripheral neuropathy. Now, peripheral neuropathy is known to be caused by radiation exposure, or if you have diabetes. That's not on the list. So the presumptive list itself also needs to be looked at and brought up to date with the known diseases that can be caused by radiation.
One of our, I speak and work with literally hundreds, I contact hundreds through Facebook and other groups every day of nickel web technicians around the service. Our biggest enemy, I kind of scold them for being so quiet, is secrecy. As I said earlier, so many are taking their secrets to the grave, and they won't even speak about very generic things. I work with nickel weapons, I was exposed to radiation. That's all they would probably have to say is a good start. And so, 2 times I've sent a proposed draft executive order to the White House. Once was about a year ago, and once was on the 3rd of March of this year. And I'm pretty biased, but anybody that's read that says it's a very good product. But basically what I'm asking for is if someone will, DOD, White House, somebody, release us from these implied requirements, union requirements of secrecy from the Cold War era. These veterans can't even speak to each other, or won't speak to each other. That's why it's so hard to get so many to even understand. They were radiated. And like I say, it took me 30 years from the time the Air Force published a document by chance and a lot of research to find out, when I was trying to find out why everybody's dying. It took me 30 years to find out we were radiated. They still aren't. And sadly, most of those, more than half of us are already dead. But it can be done. All we need is whether it's a law, executive order, and any kind of communication publicly, legislatively, that says release us from these dang security restrictions that were placed on us during the war. One thing, Bill Richardson, the late Governor Bill Richardson, he wrote a memo to the Secretary of Defense in 1996. He asked him at the time, the Secretary, to release members of the military services and others from anything to do with nuclear weapons and radiation. Now, it wasn't exactly tied to nuclear weapons. I called him and talked to him. He called me back, talked to me on the phone on June 1st, 2023, 90 days from before he died. And I asked him, he actually responded back to me, and we had a long talk. I asked him why, when you penned this memo to the Secretary, why didn't you include nuclear weapons technicians? And he literally said, and it's in the
in my mind. I can picture it. I know. I can picture what his eyes were like that time. He said, "We didn't know. We didn't know. We just didn't know." And he was not mad at me. He was upset at himself. And then he immediately changed and said, "Whatever I can do, I will do it." And right then, that moment, he says, "Matter of fact, you're going to need someone. I'm going to call Senator. Oh, she's sick." I remember that very distinctly. One of the female senators. I think she since died. But what I'm getting at is the EELYCP. I think Dave's well versed in that bill. What resulted from that letter to the memo to the SecDef was that bill that occurred in, I believe it was 2000. So that helped a lot of the folks, primarily DOE under the Department of Labor, not the veterans under the VA. So anything that can be done just to release us from asinine secrecy requirements that should no longer exist and don't need to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Dina?
I was just going to respond to that to show you how ridiculous some of it is. There's a case of one man who worked in 2 separate programs, and the restrictions were such that he couldn't even talk to himself.
Dave Crete.
Thanks for letting me speak again. This time a little lighter. I want to help clarify a couple of things, and also, the ILER, there is an organization called the Team Coalition. We specifically have a work group that's working on the ILER. Senator Rosen's staff is very, very familiar with what's going on with that. There's a lot of resources that we can provide so you can better understand. We talk about the knitter, NTTR, as this abstract place. What I'd like to do is give it a little bit of substance. The entire area of restricted airspace is the size of Maryland. The area where nobody gets to walk on is the size of Rhode Island. And in my travels back to DC, people think it's a dock. It's this little spot outside. And I want people to understand exactly how big this is. Dan, you addressed double tracks and clean slate 1, 2, 3. The cleanup, address a couple of things there. First off, barbed wire is what kept us out of it. Because when we go out on patrols, those cops, Air Force cops, when we go out on patrols, there was a sign that said, "Don't cross, it's radioactive." Like barbed wire stopped radiation. Number 2, when there was an environmental assessment done 50 years ago that said the soil, the air, the groundwater was contaminated. The cleanup that they did for double tracks and clean slate took the top 6 inches of the soil. The water table is just over 100 feet down, and the water table is contaminated. But they took the top 6 inches. They transported that by an open dump truck down to NTS. NTS is like, Clark County is a county and a state. NTS is a county, if you will, to the NTTR. They drove at 60 miles with it blowing all over the place and actually spread it worse. That was their cleanup. The reports from those tests, they all took place at the same time in an area of about a 15-mile radius. It contaminated 1,150 square miles. They wanted to see what it would do. 1,150 square miles of the Department of Energy contaminated. One of the things the Department of Energy has done since is they've redrawn the map of test pictures, given it some 20 angles and shapes, so it doesn't show that all this test takes place. Or on but I just wanted to give it some context so people understand how large an area we're talking about. And that's why it's so many people, so many locations that are out there. This is a nice spot. And when they talk about cleanups, they talk about removing 6 inches of topsoil. And they know it can be water.
Dave Crete, I hope this is not some of the land some of my colleagues want to see developed for housing. That's what they say.
No.
It's a dark joke.
No, it's
It's federal.
That's one spot.
Yeah.
Left out.
Kari, Weninger.
Excuse me, I've heard consistent statements of, "We did not know." That stands out to me because communication is key. We're doing a lot of great work through the PACT Act, EILER, all these other programs that have been instituted. But I can speak from personal experience. The younger generation of the military doesn't know about it. So there needs to be a concerted effort to communicate these wonderful programs to them, as well as those that weren't told. You're out of phase with radiation. Because unless you're working with it, people don't necessarily talk about it. So how do we reach out to those individuals, make them aware so they can get the care they need or register for these programs? Also, there's the military members that did their minimal commitment and got out. There's programs for you when you transition from retirement, but if you just do your 4 years and punch, there's not as many programs for you to understand what benefits are available to you. So one of the things I challenge everyone to consider is how are we communicating that? Can we get better? Are there any, I guess, existing pathways that we can utilize, or is this something we can generate?
Chase.
Somebody referenced the math, how they get where disbursement of radiation. If you look at the original income map, it's has the yellow, the exposed areas, and in California, there's been where somebody went from let's say in that area, and then radiation, here's the yellow, it's down below the line. So it's like this little square that's been pointed out literally from the map, and as though the radiation came down and said, oh, we're at the county limits, our county limits go around. Yeah, I don't think that's how it happened. The other thing that is I think worth noting regarding the exposure to people that live in the Las Vegas area during the Workman testing, the African American community in the West Side, the African American community pretty much thinks that for that area because of housing restriction elsewhere. So they were just sitting ducks there. Exposed as suffer, I think, greater leisure because access to health care and having the funds to be able to get cancer treatment. So I think it probably affected their disproportionately the others. And then some of them have a little bit
Thank you, Mr. Chase. Joaquin.
The issue of data transparency, accountability, and social responsibility to service members, environmental exposure. Oftentimes, service members carry out orders and plans, and so we always continue to find opportunities despite research expenditures. How the radiation incurred these illnesses on the
Back to something that was said earlier here. It's not widely known, but back in 1996 under the old plan, there was a commission put together heavily with radiation experiments, and under that, I can't speak for all individuals exposed to ionization radiation, but
service members take their oaths very seriously. They take their orders very seriously. They're very patriotic. It's getting, I know, it's getting a little emotional about thinking about this because to think decades later they won't even talk to the doctor. Or the wife. That's how serious they take their oaths. So we need to do a better job getting that Bill Clinton order out there. Maybe have a condition what we got to do that. I think we'll be thinking of ways to make sure that we get information out. Steve Nelson.
I just want to piggyback on something Dave said earlier, and I'm just going to read it verbatim because I don't want to mess it up. It's a affidavit by Dr. The USA Chipper team that came to visit Uzbekistan, and one of his points on there is like he says the USA Chipper team notified me that they were told by the senior Uzbek officials they had interviewed that the Soviets had transported mine uranium to this facility for concentration, so that there was less raw material to transport elsewhere. The senior Uzbek officials told USA Chipper, who then briefed me, that when the Soviets ceased mining operations in the area, they detonated the enrichment facility. It was scattered partially enriched uranium throughout Kharkiv and the surrounding area. I will also point out that we spent a lot of money there to build up that base, and we left in 2005. The Uzbeks have never come back in.
Thank you very much for that. Thinking of other nations that are locked in places that haven't been ready. So, Linda Chase. Chase. Thank you, everybody. I want to invite my colleagues.
And I actually have a copy of that. He posted a copy of that 1996 memorandum from the second government. It did authorize the release of information, but it did include this called simple bucket. It did not include bucket information, and there might be substantial argument. They didn't tell the people. So that legislation that occurred in the year was result. 4 years later, the result of that, but
Veterans out there still unaware and weren't covered, who feel that they weren't necessarily covered or don't even know that in your case, Rick, technicians weren't aware that they were exposed until much later.
service members, first of all, the state work, particularly like security personnel. The state work is unfair. No one else is doing it.
So that's an issue on top of what we tried to, what was attempted to have been addressed in 1996. So with that, I'll thank you all again. I always learn a lot. The staff learns a lot. My colleagues were taking notes. The staff definitely were taking notes on the new information that you presented today. It will definitely help us figure out pathways forward, get existing legislation done, but I think you've given us some ideas about more things that we can get done. I want to invite my colleagues now to reflect on what they have learned from this roundtable. And I'll have some remarks of my colleagues and Representative Titus.
Thank you. Thank you again. It's very important. Thank all of you for telling your stories and for sharing good information there. I've noticed some things that we can go back to kind of introduce and work together on. And just conclude by saying something Mr. Sanders brought up about the cleanup. There are parts of the Nevada test site that will never be cleaned up. And the DOE has already said those are national sacrifice zones. That's the term that they use, national sacrifice zone. So I would just say to you that we cannot let our veterans be national sacrifice zones. And that's what it's about.
That's quite something. National sacrifice heroes we have. Thank you.
I want to join with my colleagues in thanking the staff for having this roundtable and to have the opportunity for each of you, your own lived experiences, to share the reality that we have experienced, we're still experiencing, families have experienced, and that veterans deserve action. By us listening today to your lived experiences, helps us learn better than we policymakers. And I'll just say, it shouldn't be this hard to get relief from the government. It should not be this hard for service members, for their families, for veterans to get relief from their government. And I think the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy both have a lot of accountability and responsibility to take. I say this often, I don't work for the federal government. I work for 750,000 people here in Nevada who elect me to do a job on their behalf. And that's to be their voice and fight on their behalf in Washington for their government to be responsive to their needs. And you've given us very clear direction today on how to best do that. And I want to thank my colleagues for the work that they've already done on this issue. I was previously on armed services. I've been to both NTS and at a testing training range, formerly the test site. And it took all of me being elected to Congress, getting on the Armed Services Committee, to even getting the level of transparency that some of you have talked about. And if it's that hard for a member of Congress, just imagine how hard it is for our veterans. So thank you again for your voice in this process, and you have my commitment to work alongside our colleagues to ensure that your voices are heard loudly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman Horsford. Representative Susie Lee.
Thank you for being here and having this forum today. Thank all of you for sharing your frustration and quite honestly, the injustice that you and your families have been dealing with for decades. And, as I think about moving forward and what we need to do as a member of the Defense Appropriations Committee, it always strikes me as very rich when we're spending billions of dollars on a weapons system, but yet to provide the care for men and women who signed up and took the oath who now are suffering unbearable consequences, and the families who have been exposed to radiation and toxins at bases. I can't help but think that some of this comes down to money. And so when we look at, especially now in the middle of a war, and our need to attract service members to the armed services, I think we need to make sure we take care of those who did already, and their families. And to me, this is not just about righting the injustice of the past, but making sure we're setting course for those men and women who will, in the future, take the oath to defend our freedom. That they'll be assured that the visible, invisible risks that they are subjected to and the consequences that they will deal with, that we will make a commitment to all of them. And first, we have to make sure we honor the commitment that we need to make to all of you who have been here on the front line, not just fighting for yourselves and your families, but so many more across this country. So we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting until we do get the justice and the care that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Thank you to all the delegation for the tremendous work that you've already been doing on this issue. I also want to thank all of the advocates who have shown up today. You have dedicated your lives to seeking justice for our service members and their families, frankly, and the communities as well. I also want to thank the National Atomic Testing Museum for hosting this roundtable. I'm going to be sure to make sure I duck in and see the Dina Titus gallery. I didn't know there was a gallery, and I learned something new about my colleague. I didn't know about the book she wrote, scholarly on this issue. It's really quite impressive. Sometimes you meet colleagues and go, how the heck did they get to Congress? Then you figure out, I never thought that would be but then you learn more about it and go, yeah, I get it. I see why they're here. So I also just want to say we cannot do our job in Congress without people like you, advocates here at this table. Without all of you who are in the trenches, we would not know the extent of the work that's left to be done. And for that, I'm both honored, but I'm also infuriated. I'm trying to I'm honored to that I get to serve with all of you. I'm infuriated that we have to sit here and have these discussions. I will continue to advocate for those in this room and those who no longer can advocate for themselves, and those who stepped up and so many others have not stepped up. I'll continue to fight for every veteran so that they get the care and benefits they've earned. I want to thank you all again for being here and the work that you do. And I especially want to thank, again, my colleagues from the Nevada delegation. And remember, the truth is out there, even if Dave tells us it wasn't Tiny Workman. So thank you all for being here, and onward.